Teresa, welcome to my channel. If you are a regular, thank you for coming back again this week, and if you're new, well, it's really nice to see you. I've had a lot of new subscribers just recently, so thank you all for coming along. Once again, I'm going to be doing some gel printing. For those of you that are regulars and are not keen on gel printing, I'm sorry. I know I've done a lot of it recently, but I know a lot of you really do enjoy these tips and techniques. So as I said last week, while I'm inspired, while I've got some ideas, I'm going to keep sharing them with you. Today I'm going to be showing you how to create some fun cards using die cut masks and stencils for sort of framing techniques, and then we're going to finish them using some stamps into these finished cards. Really simple technique, follows on very much from my multi-layered print that I did. I think I did that 2 weeks ago, so you know there'll be a link to that later. If you haven't seen that, go and check that out. But for now, I'm going to get myself all set up with my plate and my paints, and I'll show you how to create these. Today I'm using my 10 by 8 inch Jelly Arts brand gel plate. Doesn't really matter what size you use. I'm only going to be working on a smallish area, but I just thought I'll get the large plate out today and use this one. All the paints that I'm using are DecoArt Americana brand. I'll run through the colours as I use them. And I have a whole selection of different stencils that I'm going to use today. If you want some tips and ideas on making multi-layered one pull prints, then do check out the card link up in the corner there. And I will link to an entire playlist of gel plate techniques at the end of this video as well. But in preparation for today's project, I have cut myself some masks. Now I've cut a star-shaped one, a heart-shaped one, and a circular one. These are, I've used a die cutting machine to cut these out, but you know, you can just draw a shape on, cut it out with scissors or a craft knife. The size that I have used for this mask is 5.5 inches square, and you might be able to see that I have actually marked some lines in here which denote a 4.5 inch square within this. And this is just so that I can line up the pieces of card that I am printing on today so that my shape's in the centre. Now I've cut my stencils, my masks out of Tyvek. You can use just a lightweight card or a standard printer copier paper. Tyvek's a little bit more hard wearing, but it really doesn't matter. I've got a small brayer today. This is a Ranger brand brayer, and I've got some scrap paper here just for rolling off any excess paint and cleaning my brayer between the layers. So I'm going to begin with my first layer. And for that, I'm going to take a stencil here. This is one that I had from Artful Days here in the UK. I'm going to pop that down on my plate, and I'm going to take my first colour, which for this one is Razzleberry. Going to apply a small amount of paint and brayer it over the surface of that stencil just to create our first layer on the plate. No need to take the paint to the edge, we're working on a small area in the middle. Then I'm going to remove the stencil and allow that layer to dry. Shouldn't take too long to do that, all depends on the temperature and the humidity of where you are, but these are thin layers of paint, so they shouldn't take too long, but do wait for this to dry before you continue. Once your first layer is dry, it's time to move on to the second layer. I'm going to be using Bright Salmon for this layer. And the stencil that I've chosen is one from Joggles. So let me just decide which way up to pop that. I'll put it that way. Place that down over the area that we're printing from. And again, apply just a little bit of paint so that we get a thin layer. Once again, remove the stencil and allow that layer to dry. Once your second layer is dry, it's time to move on to the third layer. This is a stencil from a company called Skull and Crossbuns, another UK company, but again, use whatever stencils that you have in your stash. I'm going to pop that down in place. And this layer is going to be done using coral shell. And again, apply a small amount of paint and brayer it over to create another thin layer. Remove the stencil and allow this to dry. Now this will be the last layer that we're allowing to dry. So go and wash your stencils while you're just waiting for this one, and then you'll be all set to move on to the final stage. The final layer of paint we're going to apply directly to the plate. We're not using another stencil, and I'm going to use pink chiffon for this. And again, we want to brayer a thin, even coating over the surface of the plate. Place our frame mask down onto the plate. Take our piece of card. I'm going to line that up with the grid that I've drawn on there. And then press firmly all over to transfer that paint and pull our print. And there we have our multi-layered print, nicely framed on our piece of card, ready to use straight away on a greetings card. So I'm going to remove the mask and set that aside. If you want to pull this paint, if you don't want it to go to waste, apply a thin layer of paint of a colour of your choosing. This is just some white paint. Brayer it over the surface. And then you can always use your piece of paper just to remove this excess paint. And then this sheet will be handy for collage or the basis of some other project. So, you know, that can go into your scrap pile and get used up for something else. The next technique I'm going to show you will be using the shapes that we cut out from the centre of our masks that we made. So, for instance, this is the circle that I cut out of my circular frame. And I've also cut myself just a square frame from a piece of cardboard, because I want to be able to print on a piece of paper, masking out the centre so that I can add a sentiment or something like that. So I'll show you how to go about creating using those items. The main process of creating the layers is going to be exactly the same as previously. So I shall speed through that using the stencils and the paints until we're at the point to actually pull the print. The colours that I'm going to use for this one in particular are sour apple, slate grey, chartreuse yellow and eggshell. I was going to use a more muted palette for this one. And the stencils that I'm using, I'm not entirely sure where this one is from. It's quite a nice sort of geometric shape, the same as this. Again, not entirely sure. They're quite old ones. I'm also using this one. I know this is an all and create stencil, but again, as I say, we just use whatever you have, pick some random designs and see what effect you can create. So I have my 3 stenciled layers in place. I'm about to pop on my 4th and final layer of paint. So again, like we did previously, just spray a nice thin, even coat of paint over the area that we're going to be printing from. And this time I'm going to take my frame and place that down. I'm going to take the shape that I die cut and line that up in the middle. And then I'm going to take my piece of card and press down all over to pull the print. And this should create us a patterned frame with a blank space in the middle that we can stamp a sentiment or an image into. And we should also just have a nice narrow white border around the edge. And there we go, we have our layered print with a space in the centre for stamping. I'm going to continue creating a few more prints so that I can make up a selection of finished cards to show you, and I'll be back when I've completed them. And here are my finished cards. I've embellished these cards with some stamping, maybe a little bit of doodling, and then I've just matted them all onto a piece of black card. I tend to do that. It's something I do a lot. I just think it makes the design pop. It frames the front of the card that we've created. Now, all of the stamps that I've used today, except one, are available through myperfectstamp.com in the UK. If you're in the US, you should be able to order these direct from the producers of the stamps. They're all American companies. The only exception is I have a set of border stamps here. This was like a free gift with a magazine, so, you know, I can't really say where you could get that from. But the other stamps that I have used, for example, on this one here, this was our heart that we did. I've doodled a little border around the edge and then used this Avery L set of stamps, the speech bubbles. Really like that, some really nice phrases on there, and then the little speech bubbles. And I've just popped that up on a little bit of foam. Very similar to that was this one here. I created with the star. I've just doodled a little stitched border around the star there, and again used the Avery L set of stamps to do the high five in the speech bubble. Next was one that I was not overly happy with. This was a circular one, and it left quite a bit of the paint on the plate. It happens occasionally. Sometimes you don't get a very clean print, but I didn't want to waste it, so I thought, you know, the colours that were in there were really pretty. So I took a floral set of stamps. This is the Hero Arts and Gina K collaboration, and that's called Friendship Blooms. Got a really nice big floral design, and I just stamped that down over the corner, but we can still see that colour shining through, and used one of the phrases off that stamp set as well, the thankful for you. And I think it's a shame to throw away something that doesn't come out quite as you want. I'm sure there are ways of working around it, and this was a way of salvaging a print that was not so good. Then we move on to the ones where we masked off the central area and created a frame. Now again, I've doodled myself a little bit of a border around the edge, and I've used this set here. This is a Gina K designed set of stamps called Be the Rainbow. Got some very nice phrases, and I've used one of the phrases from that on there, and again just matted onto some black card. Here is our heart shape that we did. Again, I've put a border around the edge, and this is where I've used this little set from a magazine just to finish it off. There was a few areas where it didn't pull too cleanly around the edge, and just by stamping or doodling a bit of border, it just helps define it. set of words in there, also from this Be the Rainbow set. Used that little phrase there, I thought that would be quite nice. And again, just a simple card for somebody. And finally, really like this one actually, despite the fact there were a few sort of patches in this print. Again, once you stamp a frame around it, it kind of looks like that was how it was intended to be. And this is a really nice stamp set by the Stamp Market, and it's just called Maker's Gonna Make. So I stamped the sentiment in the middle, and I made myself a little border using some of the paintbrushes and pencils that are in that set. So I hope that you can see that, you know, this is a really fun technique, good way of creating a starting point of a background for a card. If you have some little areas of your stamping that are not perfect, it's not the end of the world. You can work with it and work round it and still create some fun and colourful designs. As I said earlier, please check out the playlist that I'll link in the end card if you want some more ideas for using with your gel plate. But as always, if you did enjoy this video, please leave me a thumbs up. If you want to leave a comment, please feel free to do so, and I shall be back again next week. Bye.